Hello, everyone. Welcome to our event tonight. We were just waiting to see if there were more to join us, but I think maybe we'll get started because there is a fair bit to go through tonight. I'm Susan Eagle, and I chair the Social and Ecological Justice Commission for Shining Waters region. And I'm joined tonight by most of our commission members, and I'm just going to acknowledge who they are. Irene Green, Dawn Ford, Esther Collier, Jennifer Gordon, Juan Herr, Bruce Sweet are all on with us tonight. And we have three more members, Lois Brown, Tina Conlon, and Brian McIntosh, who may be joining us as we progress. Our commission has been around for 2 or 3 years. And part of our focus around environmental work is doing education, but also doing advocacy. The advocacy works most recently was responding to Bill 23, and certainly our education and action is what we're presenting to you this evening. And just as I introduce Esther, who is joining us, I want to acknowledge that in the last year, we made a specific effort to request of the region that we strengthen our environmental part of our commission work. And so we have been joined by some new members on the commission who will be speaking to you tonight. And we are just most pleased that with the passion as well as the knowledge of the people who have joined our commission. So I'm going to turn things over, and I should also mention that Jeffrey Dale is our resource staff person, as is Kim Udakai. So I'm going to turn things over now to Esther Collier, who's going to take it from here.
Hi, everybody. And we welcome you to the first of what we hope are a series of meetings that will support churches as they strive to reach that difficult, or no, we believe we can do it, 80% emission reduction target by 2030 that the General Council set this year. And you may find echoes of this logo throughout this presentation. And I just want to let you know that this is a symbol that indicates that the user is working with the air, soil, and water to increase life by decreasing the heat. And we use it, so you can put it in your car, on your door, in your emails, just to let people know that you are doing something about the climate crisis, and it helps to raise awareness. And I want you to take a deep breath of air, because we're going to do a land acknowledgement, and I like to really center ourselves to think about the planet on which we're on when we do this. And as we breathe, to think about where that air has been and where it's coming from, and as it leaves us, where it's going. And then to think about the ground beneath our homes and, what type of soil's there compared to the soil that's in our gardens, and just reflect on the richness of the soil when we grow things and what's happened to that soil over time. And also the waters that come and go in our air and on our land. My father speaks about being able to drink the water when he used to canoe, and just realizing that water can be pure or impure. And then that helps us think about the sustainability of the land. And when we acknowledge the land, we're recognizing that people have gone before us and that people are going to come after us. And we're recognizing that this was the traditional territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island for me, and it will be different for you. So you can think about your own land, maybe do some research, inquire about it, maybe strive to meet the First Nations in your area and work to support them in their calls for justice. So this, for me, it's the Chippewas of Georgina Island and other Anishinaabeg nations, the Huron-Wendat and the Mississaugas of the Credit River First Nation. And these are areas where treaties have been part of how this land has moved from them to other settlers' hands. And whenever I do a land acknowledgement, I try to do a little research beforehand, where I take time to sort of explore one or two of the nations that are in my area. So this last month, I looked at the Anishinaabeg nations, and I found out that they established a union in 1949, I understand that this was the oldest political organization in Ontario, and it can trace its roots back to the Confederacy of Three Fires, which existed long before European contact. But they had to establish this legal entity because they recognized that they were now having to work in settler language, and they didn't legally exist in settler language. So they had to form this entity, and there's 39 First Nations part of this political advocate of the Anishinaabe Nation. So it just makes me start thinking about that. I'd like to now invite Juan and Bruce, who are here to speak to the theological stance behind our response to the climate crisis in the United Church.
Thank you, Esther. When IPCC report came out a few years ago, for me, it was a sobering wake-up call. I feared for our planet and the future generations. My nephew, who is in his 20s, told me that he and his friends discussed the morality of having children in this milieu. Something has to change and something needs to be done. Gus Speth, a US-based environmental lawyer, climate advisor, and author, said this, and I quote, "I used to think that top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that." End quote. So we can begin to think more deeply and turn to our theology to inform our reality as individuals and as a church. This is our theological stance. Bruce?
We live in a perilous time with the global climate crisis. Instead of having respectful dominion over creation, we dominated it for exploitation. We mourn plastic-filled oceans, scarred landscapes, polluted rivers, clear-cut forests, and greenhouse-filled atmosphere. In our thirst for insatiable consumption, industrialization, and endless economic growth, we have caused serious damage to our environment. We mourn the devastating consequences. Our faith calls us to take actions to mitigate climate disaster, while recognizing that climate change is a symptom of a larger economic, political, and spiritual problem.
Our theology and creed call us to with a deep respect in creation. On the crest of the United Church of Canada, we find in Mohawk, Akwe Nia Tetewe Neren, meaning all my relations. As Indigenous people have taught us, all of creation are our relations. These relationships, however, are severed, broken, and abused. On our crest, we also state that all may be one. The time is ripe for us to truly live with a deep respect for creation as we hold sacred God's gift and as ones who have shared this earth, our home, with 8.7 million other life forms, which are expressions of God's creative spirit.
Jesus has invited us. I give you a commandment. Love one another just as I have loved you. So you also must love one another. While expanding our circle of compassion to all on our planet and seeing God in all things, we seek to join God in creating a new heaven and new earth. With God being our helper, we make our journey of liberation and healing of God's wondrous gift of a beautiful planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Juan and Bruce. we really would like to have your voice be a part of this meeting, and there certainly will be 2 or 3 times in the show when we're going to stop and listen and take conversation even. And we would like you to know, though, that if you have something you really want to say, that if you can respond in the chat, or you can put your hand up, that would be something we'll pay attention to. And we would like right now for you to share your, if you're willing to, your full name, the faith community that you are a part of. So I am part of Richmond Hill United Church's Faith Committee. I'm the Net Zero chair of that. And your contact information so that we can contact you afterwards with resources and links to the slideshow. If you don't want to put that information to everyone in the chat, please feel free to just put it to Jeffrey Dale or Susan Eagle, and they will record it and keep it private for you. I have on this slide some illustrations that help you find where the chat symbol is, how to raise your hand, because you have reactions there that you can click, and then you get a raise hand option. I have to give credit to the Willowdale Scouts who helped create these little icons for me, and I borrowed them. So yeah, so this is a safe space. So let's ensure that our comments are kind and respectful as we go on in the slideshow. I'm sure that will be how it is. We also want you to know, so that you don't have to take copious notes, but you're welcome to do that if you want. But we will have information from this presentation that you can access after the meeting. And so that will be on the Regional Council site under the Ecological Justice, and this is the Shining Waters Regional Council. So when you go to that site, at the top will pop up all these links. And I noticed something here. I noticed that if this shrinks down, it's not at the top. You have to go to this little menu here, and then you get to see it. So just in case you're like me and you can get lost, but we're under Justice. There's an Ecological Justice tab, and that Ecological Justice tab then has information. Here's where we'll have links to the slideshows, some resources for you to connect to, information about actions that we're asking you to take. I'm probably forgetting some other things that will be there, but that's where you can access information after the meeting. And I think that that's linked to that page is going to go in the chat, just so that you have it too. You can copy it that way as well. Whenever I am part of a climate information meeting, I try to have a time when we just think about what's happening currently in climate around the world, because there always are situations. It was interesting that this year we had 2 hurricanes, and one of the things that I'm going to draw attention to is that we think about the hurricanes that impact us in Canada, but they've often come through many other countries. And Hurricane Fiona killed 25 people in Puerto Rico, and I didn't find that out until I was starting to research it. And this reminds us that justice needs to be a part of our conversations about climate, because there are many, many people in the world who are being negatively affected by the climate crisis. And we don't hear about them in our news. Their voices are lost, and we have to pay attention, look for them, and recognize that the crises situations that are happening, the Pakistan floods, the heat in Europe, these things made the news, partly because of the immensity of the situation, partly because they're in countries that related to our own history. But there are many climate refugees. There's currently a terrible drought happening in Africa, and there are many millions of people, particularly women and girls in Somalia right now, who are facing famine. And these are linked to the climate crisis. The United Nations is putting forward that this drought is linked to the climate crisis. So it's something to really pay attention to. It's making me really start to look at this and think about how I can respond and make people more aware about what's happening. This is why we're reacting to this, because we recognize that there is going to be refugees and people needing to move around the world because of the climate crisis. And we as a faith community need to do our part in responding to that. We want to be evidence-based, and when we are looking at evidence-based, we try to get our information from reliable sources. For me, that's been the IPCC report. I do have a science background, but there are people who have, mine is a weak science background. There are people I know in your church communities who are engineers or scientists. They would be really good people to go to as well, to talk to. They generally have a better, deeper understanding of what's happening. I cannot read the IPCC report. It is too complex for me. So I usually read the summary for policymakers. But there's usually a press release, which is even simpler to understand. There are headline statements, which is just key points. And there are often videos linked with them as well that will have somebody speaking to you about what the report is about. When you go to the Ecological Justice site, you will see more detail about these reports and links to them. I'm only going to speak about 2 of the reports. These are ones that have really impacted the society at large. One was the special report in 2018, and it's called SR 2018. And that report, it's SR 1.5, I think, because its point that it made was that they had been saying that it was okay to have global warming get to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And they wanted this report to come out when they realized that that was not going to be accurate, that 2 degrees was going to make consequences happen on the planet that were not acceptable, and that we needed to limit global warming more than they had thought previously. And so that's when we heard the 1.5 degrees Celsius number come out in the special report. If you were listening in the news at that time, you might have heard about 12 more years being in the news, because 2018 was leading us to 2030. And what was wonderful and what was effective about this report is these 2 years and these numbers came out really loudly. So people were talking about them in the media, and the media really picked up on this. They said that to reach that 1.5, we needed a 45% decrease of carbon dioxide emissions by 2030 and net zero by 2050. And because these targets came up, that really became a part of driving municipality climate action plans. And so you can see the echoes. This is words from Toronto's climate strategy and from Richmond Hill's climate strategy. And you can see that 2050 target. We can see net zero. We can see percentages. And what's interesting, Toronto is going farther than what the IPCC reported originally. And that sometimes that is happening because nothing was done for the first 4 of those 12 years. So now we have a higher percentage that we need to reach and aim for. And out of that, then people began researching and saying, well, what is that going to look like? What are we actually going to have to do? For Toronto, they want the building emissions cut in half, 75% of trips under 5 kilometers to be walked or biked. And we're really interested if you know anything about your municipality's climate action plan. And so we are asking that, sorry, I clicked on the Transform TO link, which is cool that it's there. We're asking that we're going to take a few minutes and we'd like to hear about your climate action plan, what you know. First, I'm really interested in what you know about your municipality's climate action plan. Is it anything you've come across? And if you do know about it, what are some of its goals and targets and strategies? So we're really open to voices coming from you, the audience. I'm really patient. And this is interesting to me because this means probably you don't know anything about your municipality's climate plan. That's normal. Go ahead.
I know I looked up new markets and their target is 50% reductions. They have a ban on single-use plastics in place in Newmarket, and there's a lot of bike lanes being added.
That's really cool.
Hi, I'm Lynn from Barrie, and I know there's other people from Barrie here as well, but and I looked up the report online today, but I couldn't find any real specific goals. It was more information about how we're going to cope with this. There were some greening things, but there weren't specific carbon goals that I could see, but maybe somebody else knows where to find them.
You could go to the Barrie site because there is the link here, and these links will be on the website as well. Yeah, I think that one of the things that I'm really interested in is and please, I don't have my speaker view up, so if anyone else on the team notices people wanting to say something, just interrupt me. One of the things that I really believe we need to recognize is that the average person in our community has no idea what their municipality is aiming for. And these plans are detailed. They have had a lot of research behind them, and yet they're not being communicated to the general community. So
Esther, I know it's Susan Eagle. I know that when I looked up the Barrie one, which is the one you've brought up right now, the only one I could find was the one with the date of 2017 on it, which is what we're looking at. And I did not find any updates since 2017 identified.
Yep, I certainly haven't had time to really look in detail, but just even knowing that we don't know our municipality climate plan, that's like a key point that I wanted to see come out. And that's kind of what I expected. It is something that an ask would be for you, is to take time to look into your municipality's climate plan and see sort of what its targets are, and start asking them like how they expect you to do these things, and what resources they're going to offer to help you reach those places. The second report that we want to talk about then is the 6th assessment report, which has just come out over the last year. So it did start coming out in late 2021, came out in several sections. And I believe we're still waiting for a final synthesis report of this whole 6th assessment report. And the phrases that you might have heard in the news coming from this report were that it's unequivocal that climate change is a threat to human well-being and planetary health. But also what I'm hearing more often is this: we're going to miss a brief and rapidly closing window, and that there's very high confidence for that. And that little phrase, I want to talk a second about that window, because to me, that window is what I'm feeling is that, yes, there's an end to that window, and the end is when we're going to hit a place where things have changed so much that we can't stop them anymore. But we're at this wonderful place right now where large portions of our population really care and are anxious about the climate crisis. They don't know, they're not informed, but they are worrying and are aware of it. And I'll just tell a little story. I went to my chiropodist the other week and mentioned that I was retired, and that what I was doing, I was working on the climate crisis. And she said, "Oh, I'm interested in that." And then she proceeded to fire questions at me about the climate crisis. She knew very little. She said, "I think it's something to do with pollution." But she really was interested and wanted to know. And she even ignored her waiting patience to continue questions with me. And so this to me is a sign of sort of the average person in your community is probably really hungry for information. And that also is playing a role in what we're going to be asking you to do in this meeting that we're in. I want to let you know that in both of these IPCC reports, the scientists are not just investigating the data about what's happening in the climate crisis, but also the solutions. And these solutions are what is driving what we're asking also the churches. And not only is it about personal reductions in emission, they are saying that the only way forward that they can see is to harness this public energy. And they are saying that this can be harnessed by having these community-based meetings that are full of information sharing, education, resource sharing, that use Indigenous and local knowledge and are community-based. And whenever I hear these words, I think, that's a church. So I think we can play a big role in this, which is very much what the IPCC is calling us to do. And it was interesting to me that this was echoed by economists, because we often think it's only environmentalists exploring this, but the economists as well. And Mark Carney was quoting in the BBC Reith lectures when I heard this, another economist, her name was Eleanor somebody, I'll get back to you on that, and Eleanor Ostrom. And she's with her research has found out that there is a way out, but we have to unleash the dynamism of the private sector. So it's us, the general public, needs to be the one that wakes up. It's like waking up the sleeping giant. And he talks a lot, as Juan and Bruce were telling us, about this need to redefine values, another thing that a church does. And that means being resilient. We want communities that are resilient, that are sustainable, that are working together. And it's by setting this clear goal that we become part of the solution. So it's very exciting to me. So I know I'm talking now, and I just want to catch your attention again. We need, in reaching this 80% decrease in emissions by 2030, we are asking that we have a new narrative, because probably when you hear that first, you think church building and just reducing the emissions in the church. But we want you to stop thinking that way only and start thinking about decreasing in the church community, which means putting more emphasis on communicating and information sharing to your community. And that's why in this presentation, we will be talking about buildings and how to decrease emissions in buildings, but we are also going to be talking about community networking and advocating for policy change, because those are a huge part of the way forward based on the evidence. So buildings. This is interesting, and I'm going to play a little video clip. So one of the things that you may not know is that, there is a organization called Faithful Footprints, which is a program offered by the United Church to congregations and has tools and grants to help us live our climate commitments. So in browsing through this site, I came across this self-audit, do it yourself walkthrough audit. And I'm going to share a clip. So this is what it looks like. It's a document, a PDF document. And so I asked 2 members of my church who are not building experts to see if this was user-friendly audit that they could apply in their at our church, and I asked them to film it. So we're going to watch a little video of that, and I'll let that play.
Here we are in the church office. The only office equipment here is the computer, which is turned off every night, not left on drawing power.
The photocopier, you're saying?
Photocopier is in the other office. It goes into save mode when it's not in use. I think that's really the only office equipment to speak about here. These are LED lights. We've been replacing incandescent and fluorescent fixtures and bulbs with LEDs. Right. This entire floor that's been done. Yeah. Some parts of the rest of the church haven't yet. No, not yet.
And what about the windows here, Dan?
The windows here are not insulated.
Okay.
No.
And so just to kind of wrap up here, you have some ideas around what we really should be concentrating on. What would that be?
It would be mainly windows and doors. Now we're concentrating basically on the sanctuary. We would need to really insulate the doors or do something with them, and the windows. That's where our probably 80% of our heat is drawn out of, is those windows and doors. There's other little things we can do.
That would be true of all orange church.
It's all, that's right. Yeah, I mean, there's little things that we can still do on top of that, but those are the main escape for heat, is the windows and doors.
Great, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And thanks for all the work that you did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would really recommend that you see if you're whoever's caring for your building, because they're going to be people who know what's in the corners of your building. But what was wonderful about doing this audit at the church is, first of all, it was very user friendly, but also it then made the people doing it think about their own homes and applying it to. So I think this audit would be something you could also do for your own home, and seeing what the low hanging fruits are, what the things you can do that are not that expensive. And so just a little point. What we're trying to do is we're trying to stop the emissions that come from burning fuel. For most of our buildings, we're using a furnace, which is burning natural gas. And so that's a fossil fuel. So we're releasing carbon dioxide from that into the air as we heat our buildings. If we can find ways to stop that heat from getting out in the winter, then we don't have to burn as much fuel to keep it at a reasonable temperature. And so the ways that heat's getting out of our building are 2 ways. There's convection and there's conduction. So conduction is when the heat travels directly through solids. So imagine that you had an iron nail going through the wall of your building from inside and to outside. the heat would think that was fantastic because that's a conducting material. So every solid does conduct a little, but metal and aluminum and those things are really good at conducting. So if you have iron or you have metal parts in your windows, that's a perfect place for the heat to just go right pass through that. It conducts the heat right outside from high to low. And so anything you can do to stop that happening, you need a gap, like an air barrier, a gas barrier, to stop that heat from being able to sort of walk out over that metal. And this is where we were talking about putting like a quilt over a door as a way to stop that heat getting out, because quilts are full of these pockets of air, plus between the quilt and the door is air. And I don't know if you noticed on that window that there was a curtain, like a blind that was down in front of the window. That's fantastic. Those blinds in the Toronto School Board stopped like 12% of heat loss just by the students closing the blinds at night before they left their room and then opening them again in the morning to let the solar energy in to help heat the room up. So it saved the school board a lot of money just for eco schools training kids to lower blinds. If you had one person in your church who went around every night in the winter and closed all the blinds and curtains and then opened them in the morning, you could reduce your heat loss by 12% probably as well. And so just understanding about putting that air gap is really good. But the other way is convection. So that's where the heat sort of gets blown out, travels with the air out. And if it's warm inside and cold outside, it's going to go out. So just walking around and blocking any holes you see, and doesn't need to be expensive. I mean, roll up a piece of wool and stuff it into the hole. Find a way to block the holes around your house. Put one of those door sweeps on. Those can make a big difference as well. Toronto Hydro, this link here also tells you about ways to reduce your energy use in your homes as well. And you can lower your emissions. So when we talk about changing the light bulbs, that's because if we're using less electricity, so electricity doesn't seem to be burning carbon fuel, and yet our electricity in Ontario, still some of it's coming from plants that are burning fuel. So by reducing our electricity, we're still helping to some extent. Think of water too, because anything that's leaking, there's machines that are running sometimes on gas and energy, like fossil fuel energy, that are pumping that water to your building. So by fixing leaks, you're really reducing that use of fuels as well. And efficient appliances are just going to draw less energy. So these are some of the things we're recommending you do for buildings. But this is the big thing that we really want to change in our narrative. We want you to think about community networking. So it is so valuable to be waking up your community and sharing information, because that's when the voices start happening. So I'm going to sort of tell my story a little bit here. After that 2018 report came out, I held a family meeting and we decided that we were going to talk about climate wherever we went. And this is why I talked to my chiropodist and my doctor and, about climate and doing things in the places we work and the places we play. The goal is to make it normal so that people, when they start changing behavior, are saying, hey, this is normal. Everyone else is doing this too. It's very hard to be the first person to put a solar panel on your roof. But as you can see in this picture, once somebody puts solar panels on their roof, sort of the neighbors around start saying, hey, I'm going to do that too. It must be worth it. And so it becomes something that everybody wants to do. We're kind of like sheep. We follow along when other people do things. So then I said that I would do something in my church community as well. So all I did, and this is one of the things we are asking you to do. It's a big ask, but we want you to think of it as not really a big ask. It's just our big ask. We want you to commit to holding a climate networking town hall in your church in the next year. Set the date and invite your political leaders to it. This is what we did in our church in 2019, and virtually through the pandemic as well, we held some. So when our first meeting, we had the mayor, our MPP, and our MP all came to that first meeting. And it was not to have a speaker talking to the audience. The community was there. It was for them to ask questions to the political leaders and the scientists and engineers we had. Amazing things happened from that meeting. It put us on the map in terms of climate. So we made connections with other environmental groups. But our church, like I was invited to be part as the net zero chair, to be part of the city's planning for climate. I was like a retired teacher, but just by holding that meeting, I was suddenly a part of the town, and they saw me as being somebody who was necessary, whose advice could be asked about how to reach people, and became part of that climate planning. So did other people who were there, who came to the attention of our mayor and councillors as people who could be active in helping with this climate planning. But the other big thing that happened, your youth right now are anxious about climate. There's no way they can avoid hearing about it. By holding this meeting, you are saying to the youth, we care and we're doing something about it. And the relief that happened, not only to our youth, but to the anxious people in our community, was immense. The smiles that came from tense faces just by finding out they weren't alone. It was so beautiful to see that healing happen in the community, plus that energy that suddenly exploded. And this has happened in Newmarket too. So it's just woken up that energy where now when there's a strike being held, we have a whole community to reach out to say, let's do something. And people are really listening to us because of that. So I would like to just stop again and see if anybody, if there's messages in the chat or people who would like to say something, you know, would this be something you could do? Is it something you can commit to? What, and I haven't been following the chat very much. Are there things there we need to speak to?
I see Anne Louise from Lawrence Park is indicating they've switched to geothermal heating and wondering whether other churches in Shining Waters are on geothermal. I am a geothermal guy in my professional life, but I don't have a list of churches that have it. I know other places, so I'm not sure that's something we can look at gathering info on.
We looked into that at our church, but we haven't done it at this point. Okay. I'm hoping this can be something that can be done. To me, talking about climate is something that's cheap, right? You don't need a big outlay of money to do this, and yet it can bring in money and commitments and resources to you as you find out what's in your community. Okay, please let me know if anyone else is saying things about this. Yeah. Transportation then this is the second biggest and emissions production in cities. I'm really interested in those people who may be here from rural areas. I'm wondering if it's different and if it's maybe an agricultural based emissions place, and that may be something we need to explore in the future. The best way to do this is to begin to use physically powered vehicles, which are your own body or a bicycle or skateboard. The side benefit of that is you get fit. That's me, maybe slightly fitter because I can ride a bike now. Transit is good because now you have one vehicle that maybe is holding 50 people instead of 50 vehicles that are all emitting. And carpooling is kind of the same concept. Carpooling with that social thing, if you could arrange carpooling in your church so that people coming from one area are picking up other people, that would be really good. And of course, electrically powered vehicles. This is something that I'll be showing that Richmond Hill is really aiming to change. And it's going to save us because now gas is going to go up. So one thing people don't always recognize about EVs is that they have less moving parts, so the maintenance fees are much less. I think Fran's been talking too about deputations in Aurora and Newmarket. We also in Richmond Hill just recently met with our MP about the emissions cap on the oil and gas sector, which legislation is just being planned right now by the Liberal Party, the federal party. These are really powerful to advocate. So maybe in your community, you could hold letter writing events. You could help people access the phone numbers for their political leaders. You could join climate strikes. You could join climate groups. So we found there were climate groups in our community that we didn't know about that we then can work with. So we're not all doing things separately, but we're joining together. Also a powerful way. This is where we get policy change. I'm going to turn it over to Don Ford now to speak about community planning.
For those who don't know me in the room, which is most of you, I am a lay representative to Shining Water Council from Emmanuel United Church in Brampton, and also a member of the Ecological and Social Justice Commission of our council. And in my day life, I'm an environmental professional, have been for 35 years as an earth scientist, environmental scientist, currently working for the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, and I've been at the authority for the last 20 years. So my expertise is specifically around the science side of climate change and geological ways of mitigating your carbon footprint, if you will. So what I want to talk about a little bit is some of the things you can do for community planting, whether it's planting trees, native species around your churches, creating some local carbon sinks. And where possible, I advise people to find native drought-tolerant plants so you don't have to water them as much. And there's a lot of energy expended, especially the further north you are, to move water around. You may not be aware, but Newmarket and Aurora now receive a good chunk of their water from Lake Ontario. So it is pumped all the way from intakes in Toronto or Peel and sent all the way up to Aurora and Newmarket. And then there's a large sewer which comes down from York Region and takes it back to Lake Ontario, some of it. So that's a lot of energy involved in moving that water around. So the less watering you do, the more energy you save. And if you have drought tolerant species, when we have these summer droughts, those plants are going to grow better and they'll be able to sequester more carbon. And it also takes less nutrient energy to try and keep them alive. The other thing, in terms of community gardens, which my church has instigated in partnership with the city of Brampton, we have a community garden beside our church and some land that we weren't using. It was lawn before. Now it's a thriving community garden with a significant increase in biomass and carbon sequestering there in the plants grown in the gardens, as well as saving transport energy because local people are coming to the garden that don't have gardens of their own, and they can grow their own plants and fruits and vegetables primarily, and they don't have to take the vegetables all the way from South America or wherever to their homes. They can get them right from our garden. And it also supports social justice, the other part of our committee, because a lot of the people who want to have these gardens and don't have the space are living in apartments, maybe subsidized apartments, and this gives them a better chance to have a better diet and better access to high quality foods if there's a community garden, and they can save their money for shelter and their other needs. Next slide. The next ask is about Bill 23. A number of you have probably heard about Bill 23. It's currently before a standing committee right now. The Ecological and Social Justice Commission did prepare a response to this proposed legislation, and very thankful that our president was able to sign that, and we were able to make the deadline for submitting to the commission. And I understand that letter has also gone out to various ministers as well as the politicians in opposition to the Conservative government. And here's a chance for you to do your little bit. There are places online where you can submit your concerns to the public consultation process. And we understand this process closes on or about December 4th. There's a link right there on the page, and this will be available off the website as well. And there are links to form letters, 2 different form letters that you can modify. You can do up your own letter. And there are also some other actions from the Greenbelt Alliance on the on the third link there. And we strongly encourage people to send in their thoughts. And I have to say, I do have a bias because I work for a conservation authority, and Bill 23 is very hard on conservation authorities in general, in my opinion, and as well hard on the environment. We believe it's possible to build more homes and build more affordable homes without necessitating the diminishing of our natural environment here in Ontario. We have a lot to celebrate with what we have, and we've been utilizing it a lot through the pandemic. A lot of people who don't have other easy access to parks or vacations, at least they can go to their local park and get out in green space. And it's been shown that helps relieve stress and actually improves health outcomes. So if anybody has any questions, we're able to talk about that as well, but I'll ask for the next slide for now.
And at this point, Jennifer Gordon is going to come and share a little bit about herself first, maybe, and then speak to the next few slides.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, I also go by J, they, them pronouns. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Toronto's engineering department, civil engineering department, and I work specifically, I do research looking at how we can reduce the risk of pollution on mine sites. So it's biochemical research, but here I'm speaking, I mean, the climate impact is something I've always been like very interested in as well. And I hope maybe I can someday work in that field. But here I'm just speaking a little bit about food waste. And this is actually a couple slides stolen from a climate change mitigation course that we teach at U of T. So basically just when we think about our relationship to food and trying to reduce the harm, a lot of the changes that have to happen at a policy level and at a government level and at a corporate level with industry. But there are also some behaviors that we can take, and it's also helpful to understand the overall system. So first of all, if we talk about corn, which is a major crop in the United States and Canada, and we look at how much of the food that is grown we actually end up eating, only 17% of the United States is being eaten by people, because a lot of it is being grown either for fuel or for export or to feed to animals. And that's a major use of the grains that we grow. And that can be problematic because when you go up the food chain, and this is the next slide, when you go up the food chain, actually the amount of energy that then we get when we consume the animals as food is less than 10% of the amount of energy that was in that food if we were to eat it as plant matter, just because of the way that you have to feed an animal throughout its whole life. And so even though meat is more energy dense than plant crops, you get much less energy, especially as you see in this graph, when you're talking about beef cattle. So the trouble with cows is twofold. One is we have to grow a lot of grains in order to feed the cows, to get the energy from the cows. And the second trouble is, quite humorously, their farts. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions, carbon dioxide is the major one that we're always talking about, but methane is actually 8 times stronger, and that comes from cows. And so how to avoid the climate change impact of cows actually at a global scale is a huge problem because we grow so many cows to feed ourselves beef products. And so there are several ways of dealing with it. One is to go more vegetarian, but for all those people out there that know dairy farmers or beef farmers and are related, there are still lots of things you can do while having a healthy farm to actually try to reduce the impact. There are vitamin supplements and algal-based supplements that are changing the enzyme system inside their digestion, so they digest the methane better. And if it becomes carbon dioxide instead, that's much less of an impact. Or you can collect the cow manure and use it for a green gas system to generate electricity, which is the diagram down there at the bottom. Or you can breed cows that generate less methane. And so, yeah, feed supplements, changing the feed that they eat, changing the breeding, capturing it and making fuel, green fuel out of it. There are lots of options. And so we should really think about how we farm cows because that would have a major impact. But then finally, the next slide, there's also things you can do as an individual. So prioritizing plants in your diet and minimizing meat is good for your health as well as for the planet. But also when you select seafood, you can look for certain check marks and things that indicate that that seafood was grown sustainably. And you can also try to eat locally as much as possible. None of these things are going to be new or surprising to you, but perhaps one that you might not have thought of is eating mindfully, because research has been done which indicates that if you take time to really appreciate and enjoy your food, you'll actually probably get better value from it and not need to eat as much while still getting like good nutrition. And that'll end up meaning that you don't overeat as much, which is good for your health, but also better for the environment. So just focusing on and enjoying your meals is actually a good way to take action for the environment.
And Dawn's going to speak again now about renewable energy.
Thanks, Esther. And a lot of people have heard, of course, about solar, PV solar, we call it photovoltaic, and it is a source of clean energy. And it also provides, can provide energy during power outages. And I know my sister's cottage is powered solely by solar power. And they actually clap their hands when the power goes out elsewhere because they're not affected at all. It can be an income source for some churches. If you have a contract for it, there are companies that will ask for permission to install solar panels on your church, and they'll pay for it and then give you sometimes a share of the proceeds of that in terms of kind of rent. So kind of renting your roof. You can see that there's a significant capital cost, obviously, to put in a big solar system, but there can be significant savings recognized. It depends on your church configuration, how much roof area you have, and what direction it points. And there's some links there at the bottom for excellent resources in terms of advice on whether solar might be in your future, whether it might be worthwhile for you. But it is a very adaptable energy solution. And I do know a number of churches in the Toronto area and elsewhere in Ontario have been utilizing solar power. The next one is one that someone already had a question on in terms of either air source, ground source heating. Ground source heating is one of the most energy efficient ways to heat a building. And again, my somewhat bias, I've led symposia on ground source heating and cooling. And I'm a big proponent of using this technology because the economists and the engineers have shown me how much money and energy can be saved by going to ground source heating and cooling. Air source is not quite as efficient, shall we say, as ground source heating and cooling. Essentially, all these technologies take energy out of the air and move it in, moving energy back and forth between the outside and inside your building envelope. So they can both heat your building and cool your building. Some of them will totally replace your furnace. Some work in concert with an existing furnace system. And the sustainability that the technology lasts for a long time, typically, usually about at least 20, 25 years. In the terms of ground source heating and cooling, it's even longer. I know wells, in fact, I've monitored wells that have been in the ground 50, 60 years, and they're still in about as good a shape as they were when they were installed. So these are, they sound like new technologies, but the science has been around for a long time, and it's been proven over and over again that this can work, and it can be very effective for churches as well as for homes. Next slide.
Before I move on to the next slide, there's a question in the chat about, can you replace a generator with solar power for possible outages? Do you know anything?
it's possible. The issue is you're going to need a battery storage capability, really, because you don't know whether the power is going to go out in the daytime or not. So generally, those that rely on solar, such as my sister at her cottage, you need a battery bank to retain power to carry you through those outages. And generally, people find that it's not necessarily the best way to replace a generator because it doesn't cycle the energy through the batteries as much as it should. Depending on your type of batteries, some batteries will tolerate it more than others. But some batteries develop a memory over time. The new lithium batteries can develop a memory. If they're always fully charged and then only drawn on occasionally, they may not have much reserve power when you need them.
Thanks.
Would you recommend ground source for replacing a generator? Or that would be for everything?
No, a ground source is for heating and cooling.
Yeah.
Energy generators it's theoretically possible to use the heat differential to drive probably a Stirling cycle engine, I think is what it's called. I don't have a lot of experience in that area, but we don't usually see geothermal used in energy production. This is not the high temperature geothermal you think of with hot springs. It's you're relying on the fact that the ground under your feet is a pretty stable, say 10 to 15 degrees year round. You only have to go down about 20 feet or so. Sorry, I'm in imperial and metric. Only go down a short distance and the temperatures are very stable. So it may be -10 outside, but the ground is still at about 10, 15 degrees. So it's that thermal difference that is being used to save you, to make it efficient.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about, and I'm seeing some of the questions in the chat about topics, which is excellent because that's one of the things, the next question that's coming up that we really need input on. So you can start thinking about topics you would like to see addressed in follow-up meetings. But in terms of financing, because I think what we're hearing is that one of the biggest problems that churches are having is they say, well, it's just financially impossible for us to do anything about this. And I was really thankful to see that Peter and Penny Wilkins were reporting that they had taken advantage of grants which paid for the improvement, and now they have a 30 to 40% reduction in their building operating costs. And one of the things, and feel free to jump in, Peter and Penny, but one of the things is to think of the life cycle cost. So it's a case of getting some investment at the beginning, and this is what these TUC loans that are like 0 interest loans for 5 years are very, low interest loans. So you get them to install it, and then you pay them back over the life cycle, because eventually it's going to be paid off about halfway through that. For solar panels, it's 10 to 15 years. And the solar panel lasts for 25, so you can pay it off, and then the rest of it is just income for your church. And Susan, I was going to invite you to share a little bit about the church in Barrie and how you financed the installation of putting the panels on the church.
Thanks, Esther. Yeah, it was about 10 years ago that we looked at getting in on the solar panel initiative, and the big question was, how would we finance it? We had just sold the church manse, but as many of you know, you're not supposed to use the principal, only the interest when there is a manse fund. But we sought permission through the presbytery if we could invest in ourselves, and we were given that permission. So we used the manse fund to purchase the solar panels, and the money that's coming back from the solar panels, a percentage of it is going to be used, and the other percentage of it is to pay back the fund. And we set it up for a 20-year cycle, so that at the end of 20 years, we will have completely replaced the money that we used for the solar panels. So that's how we financed it, and it seems to be working.
Yeah. And I'll just share a little thing from the TDSB as well, because the TDSB, there's Toronto District School Board, they have put solar panels on many schools, but they aren't actually getting the income from the solar panels. So another company has basically rented the school roofs, but they paid the TDSB to fix the roofs. So it was, the money went to repair these old roofs in the TDSB, but the company was very happy to do that because then they got access to that space to install their solar panels with that excellent sunlight that was there. So I think there are those kind of options potentially as well. So think about life cycle costs. Your municipality may have its own rebates and incentives. There's links here to Toronto, but potentially there's similar things in yours. And also this home energy loan program is interesting, and I'm not an expert by any means, but my understanding is that you basically use your homes to pay for what you're doing for your energy use in your home. And what happens when you sell the home, that debt goes with the home. So it's you're not saying, oh, I fixed this home up, now I have to move, I've lost all of that money. No, that debt becomes part of that home. The home is the one carrying on that because they're the ones benefiting from it. And so that is something that may be available in your community. You may know of things that we haven't thought of, and we do have a folder that you can access that where funding opportunity resources are put there. There are federal grants as well that are coming out. A lot of them pay back for themselves over the life cycle costs. Okay, so I wanted to talk a little bit about Richmond Hill's path to a low carbon future. And I just wanted to say some interesting things about this. You may be surprised in your municipal report when you get to it that the targets they have and the actions they're expecting are surprising. I'm going to go down. So they are saying that they want to be net zero by 2050, but they're just a couple of pages down here. They talk about 80% of buildings are retrofit for energy efficiency and switch to electric heat pumps and electric water heating. And this is by 2050, I believe this is done. Rooftop solar is on 50% of buildings, and they're looking for people to invest into this. Honestly, the payback is better than banks, so I'm thinking about it. So you know that you would get the income back from making these investments into doing this kind of thing. Yeah, and they are looking for EVs. 100% of new vehicle sales in Richmond Hill are to be EVs, electric vehicles, by 2040. Some of these things are really surprising. But the other one I wanted to get to was down in, they talk about the economics of it. And because I think people can be really surprised if that Richmond Hill is expecting to make sort of a profit from doing these actions for the climate environment. So this is investing in the low carbon city. So they are saying that in the early years of the transition, they need capital investments and they are greater than the savings and revenues generated. But from 2032 forward, annual savings and revenue begin to increase as energy improvements turn into savings. By 2040, the cumulative benefits outweigh the costs of the programs. And by 2050, the cumulative net benefits reach $12.3 billion. And they're saying there's an 8.4 billion investment needed, but they're going to get 12.3 billion out of that as net benefits. So this is why municipalities are coming up with climate action plans, because they're pretty clear that they're going to end up making money in the, that's not even a very long time frame that's going to happen. So sometimes we don't think about the fact that there are going to be these benefits over the life cycle of what you are working on. So we would like your input, and I'm loving seeing this conversation in the chat about what you're interested in, what your needs are. The kind of questions we received about solar powers and generator, those are the kind of questions that we expect are out there, that here's a group of people who have, maybe can access to experts if we don't have them. So how do we go forward? What direction do we want to do? What would you like us to provide for you in our next meeting? And then we'll look at the second question after that. So maybe even someone who's been monitoring the chat, what's coming out in the chat?
I see John Ryerson has his hand up.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. I'm interested in the behavioral side of this issue because we've been pounding at this for decades and without much impact. One could argue that telling people that they got 8 years before we hit the wall, oh, well, we've got 8 years, it's like I'll quit smoking next year. So I'm not sure that we're reaching people to counter this idea that the economy overwhelms the environment when in importance, when in fact they should be hand in hand. So from a behavioral thing, I like things like the garden work out front of your church, because that can spread on a street, of course, but it's walking the talk, and it gives everybody a chance to feel like they're doing something. And sometimes those very grassroots things are much more important than the big stuff. Yeah, if you're replacing your boiler, you should do things, but yeah, I just think that and then I think the other, anyway, I just think that would be interesting to look at the behavioral side of this issue, and how do we make the tent bigger? Because holding a seminar of everybody on this seminar is already in the bubble, right? Like, we don't need to be convinced. So how do we take that message to people that are not in the bubble? I remember hearing a couple of years ago, pre-COVID, somebody on CBC talking about the need for humor. That we're always preaching disaster all the time on this topic and terrible headlines. And we know, and those of you that are pastors, how stressed people are these days. Adding more stress is not necessarily helpful. So you need hope, you need a feeling that I can do something. And I don't think that's the conversation. The technology is there. We can help you. And presume, that if you do the audit, you can figure out what the best technology is for your situation. But I think there's a bigger issue here.
Well, you're going with my heart there. Totally agree. I think we can do stuff about that too. Thank you.
And Dave and Bonnie Collicott.
I'm sort of amazed that nobody has talked yet about insulation. Probably one of the biggest costs in our society is heating buildings.
Yeah.
And insulation is not all that expensive, and it's not all that hard to do.
Yeah.
So I think that some discussion about insulation, and specifically insulation of church buildings, which by their very nature can be pretty awkward, would be one of the low-hanging fruits that we should be looking at with some urgency.
Can I have a follow-up question? If I'm in a church and someone tells me I need insulation, like, who are the people that would help me actually get that done? Because I might be overwhelmed about that. Who should we invite to a meeting on that? That could just give tips on what kind of insulation do I buy? Where do I go? Who are the experts that might know that? I mean, I agree. When I was talking about convection, conduction, that gaps, insulation is full of air pockets. It's definitely important.
Suggest that you can insulate walls if you're willing to give up about 6 inches of room inside the building. You can insulate walls by gluing on 2 inches of styrofoam and a half an inch of drywall, and you've upped your insulation quite a bit. When you're insulating a roof, you can when you're reshingling a roof, let's say, you can put on insulation as well there. And I don't have any names of people, but if that's something that we might well take a look at and see who will do it.
Yeah, I actually have some contacts in that area through the Cartwright Center for Conservation. I was just through their sustainable houses for about the 3rd time, and they do talk a lot about insulation. So that's a very good point. And we can perhaps have a special seminar just on that. I recognize that there are special issues with church buildings because of both their exterior and interior walls are somewhat challenging. Windows are a big loss And I know my own church has a number of windows that are definitely not up to contemporary standards. So I'll take that under advisement, and I'll talk to some of my colleagues about that.
You know, it's these simple things. I think in your church community, there's probably somebody who has that answer about, you know, look, the 2 inches of styrofoam and half an inch of drywall, and then you find somebody who can do that, you know, who knows something about that and can do it for you. I mean, those little pieces just fill in the gaps in people's information are powerful. So in our church, we have somebody who said, you know, plexiglass is really cheap. Let's just Velcro plexiglass sheets, and we cut them to the shape of our weird windows and just Velcroed them on the outside, on the side, so you can just pull them off when you need to. But they created that insulation gap over the windows. They've saved a huge amount of heating loss in all our windows, in some of our windows. I mean, we need more time to do the rest of them, but cheap solutions that engineers know about it. Even with stained glass, see, if you put that plexiglass sheet over it and it's clear, it's not hiding the stained glass, like the light's still coming through it. Even a sheet of really thin plastic can make a huge difference just by sealing that air gap in between. Yeah.
Thanks. Yes, Kevin has got his hand up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciated Juan's opening theological quote, which I have on my bulletin board. And in particular, I just want to uplift the top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And it strikes me that that's in our wheelhouse as a church. And I mean, it's all great, all the different stuff going on there. And there's a lot of people with much more expertise than me working on this stuff. But what can we do to address the spiritual transformation that I think needs to happen for us to really address the problem of climate change? So I'm just putting that out there. Like, I think we can go with like our expertise is kind of spiritual things, and how do we provide avenues for that to happen so that we move our society away from a culture of greed or apathy? Just throwing that out. I don't have a simple answer to that, but I mean, it strikes me that that's kind of, that's a huge calling for us as a church.
I mean, like Mark Carney wrote the book Values, because this is his point. We need values changes, and this is exactly what churches should be about. So totally think this is really important.
Can I just say that meeting that you recommended, I really think a lot of good stuff could come out of that.
The behavioral.
Actually, the mayor of Newmarket and I were both on a Newmarket environmental committee, and we went around to houses giving people a light bulb. That was years ago. It was to put on their front porch. It was not LED because they didn't have that at the time. But I think you'll find lots of people are looking for lots of answers. And if you get them in a room together, I had done a green audit in my house, so I could give you some ideas for filling plugs in, you know, the child safe plug or whatever. That's what I was told to do on all outside walls. Another thing is this piece of material that I'd never seen before. It's a little round coil that you put underneath your baseboards to keep heat escaping from your baseboards. This is for a house. I don't know if it will fit in a church. We've just put in a bunch of new toilets that are the energy efficient ones. So your point about talking about it, making an issue of it, for me, I decided I'm not going to go to any of my hiking groups unless I carpool. I made the announcement to the group and I just said, I have to change my behavior. I said, so I'm going to walk in town unless I organize a carpool. And what I was shocked at was how many other people decided to do it too.
Yeah.
Because COVID, we've all gone backwards. We use plastic bags again, and we drive on our own and all those things. So being vocal about what you're doing, as opposed to judging somebody else, but just saying, I've made this commitment for myself to help myself. And it seems to have rippled out to the whole hiking group.
Yes. I cannot emphasize enough talking about it is right. We had a climate service at my church and I said, talk. I'm asking you to do this
Talk.
one thing. It's free, it's easy, talk about it. If you
Yeah.
want to look at behavioral changes, that is the biggest thing. It normalizes behavior. So talk about it where you go. Anyone else, or can we look at this other, or at least bring this other question into your viewpoint? We're thinking that it could be really valuable to keep track of progress, where we're just noticing what is being done in various churches around Shining Waters. And so we're thinking that we'd love to have a place where we could collect information and that people could say, oh, look what they're doing, I'm going to try that. Or is this valuable to you? Is the Ecological Justice site the place to find that? Would that be the best place for you to see it? How do we collect it? We'd love input. Maybe first, is it valuable to you? Newsletter, I see.
Does Faithful Footprints offer ways to measure the changes that they're helping to implement? Because we all talk about these 80% reductions, but how do we really know that we're getting anywhere near it?
I believe, Jennifer, do you want to speak to that?
I'm not sure that I can. I know that the TUCC has a Green Awakening Network, which is trying to follow what projects different congregations in the Toronto area do. And then there's Anglaise Verte, which is a Montreal-based similar type of organization. And Faithful Footprints is larger because it goes across all of Ontario, right? But all of these networks are sort of a little bit scattered. Like they each have their own email lists, and some have newsletters and some have some things, but we were just wondering with like the whole province, whether we oughtn't to have one sort of place where everybody could go and everybody could share, talk to each other. And we really wanted the opinions of everyone here about what would be the best way of doing that. And so it's more interactive instead of just having sort of an email list that you send a newsletter to or something, you know?
Yeah. I'm picturing like a table with like church names and, you know, initial emissions and follow-up emissions and number of community meetings they've had and places in the community. As far as we know, there is no system to measure this 80%. It is very much a open-ended thing. And I think though that measuring could be really something to help us target and be more directed in what's happening. Local, regional versus province-wide. Yeah, anyone?
Doug Daly here from St. Paul's United Church in Aurelia. Sorry, I'm not visually present. We have done the Faithful Footprints and received the maximum grant of $30,000. There is, in order to do that, a measurement that has to occur before you start with your changes and after, done by the people at Faithful Footprint. They know the metrics to be used. I also think it is an excellent idea to have some vehicle where you would list who you are and, if you will, a chart that would then you could check off what you did at your church. And I think if that's shared by the various churches, I think that could be a motivator in itself, and that that church is doing this. Oh, we should maybe try that. Or let's call them and find out what exactly they did. Where that fits is where Dave and Bonnie were talking about insulation. We just used a local source for putting 12 more inches of insulation cellulose into our attic. We have an attic that's flat and also slanted. And so we had to buy a different kind of cellulose for the slanted part, so it wouldn't simply slide down. So I think if, back to this chart idea, if there was one, and we checked off that St. Paul's had done some insulation, and people could call us to ask, well, how do you go about it?
Yeah. So now I have another column in my table, which is contact information for the church to say, you can say, hey, can I find out about how you did that or where you did that? I mean, this to me is brilliant. Yeah. So thanks, Steve and Bonnie, you're sharing. Are you sharing a source of info, or are you saying this itself is just fantastic? So this, what I'm hearing from this conversation for a next meeting would be that I'm hearing a couple of topics. One, heating the buildings, insulation, topics about how to access that, get some really practical information on board, but also the whole behavioral side of the issue. And that I think will help answer those questions that were up earlier in the chat about, you know, habitat loss and because those issues of habitat loss and animals and forests and degradation that is crucial to actually fixing this. All of these things are bigger than I personally can do, but as we raise this topic so that the whole community begins to talk about climate, I mean, that is the ideal goal, because now those people are going to vote in people who are likely to make those policy changes that have global change. And to me, we have to sort of wake up the sleeping giants so that there's that values change spreads and becomes a part of how people look at the world and vote, and that drives the policy change. So in my mind, that is our way, but certainly there could be a whole topic on that. Yes, Paul?
You know, like I've made my point about animals and forests. To me, those things are the things that I'm concerned about: the destruction of the forests and the death of the animals. Climate is just too abstract for me. Now, maybe I'm different. Everyone else seems to think seems moved by climate as an issue. But to me, it's meaningless because it's just the temperature. But I am moved by talk about the destruction of forests and the fact that I can't swim in lakes, and you know, the too much, the cows and the pollution in the lakes, and you can't swim in the summer. That really bothers me. It's very concrete. And what I don't like about the climate thing too is I just see it's like more of the same problem, because it's like, oh, we're gonna use this new technology or that new technology or this insulation, or we're gonna change, you know, this solar panel, or it's all just technology, and technology is the problem, not the solution.
I mean, it is something that I really wanted to say, and I don't think I said it at the beginning, is that we totally get that mathematically individual little things aren't going to make the difference. It is the policy changes, that global policy changes, that are going to make the difference. And that has to come around by people voting differently and values changes in society. And I agree, we need a conversation on how do we do that. I think it's really big.
Jesus didn't talk about the climate. He talked about the sparrow, or the lamb, or the fish. He didn't talk about, well, it's getting hot. I don't know. It's just too abstract, I think. But anyway, I've had my say. Thank you.
I would add, Paul, that it's not just about the heat, it's about the distribution of water. So we're seeing these droughts, which then affect the forests as well. The fires we've seen in BC, the fires we've seen in the southwest US, as well as the direct impact on the fruits and vegetables that we would like to have at this time of year. So not all climate effects are abstract. There are direct effects. I see them in the bird communities that I monitor that have changed over the past 20 years. And the communities are different than they were, which then affects, everything's connected, I guess is the best way to put it. That the climate changes are affecting our forests, they're affecting our ecosystems.
This is why our biggest ask is that you pick a date and invite people and have an open town hall on climate and what are we going to do about it. I think it just, you start hearing these practical stories. Go ahead. Is it Dave? Dave and Bonnie. Yeah.
Thank you. It seems as if we have a little bit of a shortage of actual data on what we can do. I put a link into the chat for a terrific source called Project Drawdown. And that's, of course, it's look all backwards in the screen, but if you click on Project Drawdown, you'll find a lot of very serious information on what we can do. And I think you'll find that you'll see the connections to the spiritual there.
That's cool. I don't know if I didn't include that on that slide that had all the different groups to join. It was because I heard that there was trouble with using their name now in certain places, but Project Drawdown is amazing. Yeah. And we are capturing all these links. We will include them in what we share with you as well. Okay.
A number of us have signs, drawdown signs on our lawns. So we did it during the election, but I've just kept it up. I don't know if you have signs available to hand out. They did at our church.
I think that's coming from Newmarket or Aurora Newmarket. Do you still have signs? I don't know, Fran, do you know? She's here, I think, or was. Okay, she may have left. We can see if there are signs still available. Okay, thank you. So this is the last slide. We're just planning that there will be another session in spring. We'll look at these topics based on the input that we've received today. So that will be in the Regional Council website under our page, Ecological Justice Shining Waters. And we really appreciate you being here tonight to talk with us about climate. It was a broad topic today, but next time it will be much more narrow as we try to target in on something that is, maybe more relevant to communities, and may have to hold two sort of little ones for 2 or 3 different topics. Yeah, I think we're capturing the chat. Some great input.
Esther, if I can ask one other question, it's Doug Bailey from St. Paul's in Aurelia. The idea of the chart that we were talking about earlier, is that something that I or others could be involved in creating in the meantime, or at least starting on it?
The idea of, I missed that. Oh, the table?
Yes, the table that would show which church had done what and contact point.
Yes, that would be fantastic. So let's make sure we've captured that request. So we'll get back in touch with you. Fran, go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah, I put this in the chat, but I do have signs available. We have just changed our name because this whole issue with the names with Drawdown. But we've changed our name to Climate Action Newmarket Aurora, and but I do have signs available, and I've put my name, my phone number in the chat. And if anybody wants a sign, by all means, call me, and I can get them to you.
This is the networking that we're so hoping through these meetings.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
Me too.
So thank you. Okay. Susan, anything else we need to say?
No, I'm just wondering if you want to take the screen down and just open it up if there's any other comments from folks. Any final thoughts from folks about information that you do want the commission to follow up on?
I just found out I was sending messages to one person in particular as opposed to everyone. And so I've just shared a message about a private members bill for a second urban national park. Ontario Nature is doing amazing stuff.
Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, please keep sharing. And you have our email. Did we put our emails? They're definitely on the Ecological Justice site. Jeffrey's and Susan's emails are there, so you can respond to them. Yeah.
Okay. Well, then maybe I can just say a word of thanks to Esther and Dawn and Jennifer, who worked at producing some of the slides for tonight, and Juan and Peter with the theological reflections for tonight. Bruce, I'm sorry. we have identified this as a significant thing for our commission to be working on. And we look forward to more input from everyone. So please don't hesitate to be in touch with us.
Thank you.